Only two of you. Abhisar is absent. 3 students are absent. 3 are absent. We are already done, no? We are starting with the next chapter today, that is improvement. We started. This one. Take out your volume. I asked you other day to bring the second volume. We brought. We have started this improvement. Which page is it? Page 158. Okay. So we were talking about the other day. We had just started the chapter, and we were talking about the food, the revolution, that part. We were talking about the revolution part. So the definitions you are supposed to remember. We were talking about revolutions. What were the common revolutions? Revolutions mean what was the need? You'll have to take a care of this, take a note of this. The different efforts. What are the different efforts? The different efforts are. Take out your volume. Take out your volume. Take out your. This is this one, na? I asked you to bring volume. The other day I asked you to bring. You not there the other day? So I asked you to bring volume too. Now, what are the efforts? The last day we discussed about this efforts, meaning why there was a need to increase the production, and what type of production? The production of food. The production of food in different aspects. What is it? Categories. Production of milk. If the production of milk was increased, that is what is known as the white revolution. Production of crops, green revolution. Production of pulses, that is known as golden revolution. Production of oil, yellow revolution. So all these we have to remember. That's the first part. Now we talk about the next part of the chapter, that is what are the different scientific management practices for improvement of the crop yield. What are the different management practices? We are going to study here. What are some of the scientific management practices? See there, the first is we try to understand different types of crops. The other day I was explaining you also the scientific management practices. But first of all, to understand the scientific management practices, we will study this. But after this, I'm sorry, but before that, we'll have to come across that before the concept of scientific management practices we understand, we will have to understand that what type of food crops contain what type of nutrient. That is very important. What type of food crop? And first of all, what are the primary nutrients? This is what I discussed the other day also. What are the different type of nutrients? The different type of nutrients are the carbohydrates, proteins, fats, majorly. And then we have got the mineral and the vitamin. So talk about the carbohydrate, proteins and fats. So when we talk about the carbohydrates, proteins and fats, carbohydrates are present in various different type of foods. So say suppose I talk about the wheat and the corn and the rice, sources of carbohydrate. Protein, the different pulses, the nuts, the gram, sources of protein. Then what about vitamins and minerals? Variety of different type of fruits and crops that we come across. Green leafy vegetables that we talk about. Sources of minerals and vitamin. Fats would be oil, and then butter, and then cheese, and then the milk products. All these are sources of fat. So here you have to remember this. Something more to take a note in this table would be these different sources you will have to remember. You may be asked sometimes for 1 mark, 2 mark, the different sources. So these different sources you have to go through. Some common sources and what type of nutrients do they contain. We were talking about the leguminous crops. The other day I explained to you also what are leguminous crops and what are their functions. Fodder crops. And leguminous crops, what do? They always have a capacity of storing the nitrogen. Leguminous crops always have a capacity of storing the nitrogen in the roots. Have a capacity of storing nitrogen in the roots. And they can store nitrogen, capture nitrogen in what form? They can convert nitrogen in the form of nitrates. The molecular nitrogen can be converted into nitrates. Why? Because the plants directly cannot utilize the nitrogen of the atmosphere. What is the proportion of nitrogen in the air? 78%. 78%. So now this much of the carbon dioxide, this much of the nitrogen also the plants are not able to use. The plants are actually having so much of it, but still the plants are not able to use. Since the plants are not able to use this nitrogen, then what are we coming across? That these plants which are not able to utilize the nitrogen from the atmosphere, then how do they get the nitrogen? They get the nitrogen from the soil. In what form? Nitrates. Are we able to utilize the nitrogen from the atmosphere, though there is so much of nitrogen in the air? No, we are able to take the nitrogen from the plants. We eat variety of food crops, cereals, grains, and from there we get the nitrogen. So leguminous crops, fodder crops, remember what is the concept. Now we talk about the crop seasons. What are the different type of crop seasons? Crop seasons, as we understand, the next important concept, the crop season. So which are the crop seasons to come across? There are two types of crop season. One is known as the Kharif crops and the other is known as the Rabi crops. So here, when we are talking about the concept of Rabi and the Kharif, we are only talking about the two major concepts. What are some of the major seasons to grow different types of crops? Now, all the crops majorly can be divided into two broad categories. There are many subcategories. We are not talking about that now. The two major categories. What are the two major categories? Some crops grow best in the monsoon. Some crops grow best in the winter time. So monsoon and summer we are clubbing together and we are saying that some crops which grow the best in the monsoon. What are these crops called? Some crops which grow best in the monsoon. You underline also. These are called the Kharif crops or the rainy season crops. And the ones which grow in the dry winter season, these are called the Rabi crops. Dry winter season, Rabi crops. And Kharif crops are always the monsoon type. Say suppose I now talk about the rice and the paddy and the corn. We get to see nowadays, this season. So what type of crops are these? Kharif. And if I talk about the cotton and the pea and etc., the mustard and sunflower, we get to see majorly in the summer, winter time. So those are the Rabi crops. Next is photo periods. Take that word, photo periods. You'll have to take a note. What are photo periods and what is their basic concept? When we are talking about photo periods, what is the definition of photo periods? The definition of photo periods is The definition of photoperiods is the duration of sunlight that is necessary for plants to grow. The duration of sunlight necessary for plants to grow. So when we are talking about the duration of sunlight, plants can be categorized under three major heads. Plants can be categorized under three major categories based on what is the duration of sunlight they require. See there are three categories of plants to mention. We first of all mention about the long day plants. See there, long day plants. What are long day plants? Plants which require a long duration of sunlight. Long duration of sunlight means more than 12 hours of sunlight they require. More than 12 hours of sunlight these plants require for the process of fruiting and flowering. Give an example of such type of plants, long day plants. Spinach. And there are so many other different type of plants. So when we are talking about the long day plants, there are many such plants. We talk about the mango. Mango is also a long day plant. When we talk about these type of plants, remember we divide the day into we are talking about a 24-hour day. And out of the 24-hour day, roughly around 14 to 16 hours is 14 to 16 hours roughly is the daytime. 14 to in certain places it may be touching something around 18 hours also, but on an average 16 hours of daytime. Out of the 16 hours of daytime, long day plants, when we say, it is something around more than 10 hours. More than 10 hours of sunlight they require. So these are those places, and of course we are talking about the summer time. Think of our region only. If I talk about the months of May and June, the streak of sunlight or the rays of sunlight we can sense right from 5 o'clock in the morning. So 5 o'clock in the morning till almost about 6 o'clock in the evening. Sun sets almost by 7 o'clock in the summertime. Sun sets almost about 7 o'clock in the summertime. So roughly if I say from 6 o'clock to 6:30, it's almost 12 hours. No? So at this time, so many different type of crops grow. Are we able to see those crops now? Will they grow the best now? Because now the duration of sunlight is so less, and then also so intensity of light is so less now. Okay, long day. Then what should be short day plants? They need a lesser duration of sunlight, and the intensity of sunlight should be much lesser. The strength of the sunlight should be low, not like the months of May and June where the sunlight is very strong. It should not be strong. Like winters, yes. So when we are talking about it's a bright sunny day. A bright sunny day in the month of May and a bright sunny day in the month of December, is it the same? Will it be the same? No. The strength of the sunlight, that is what we call it as intensity. The strength of the sunlight is not the same, though it's a bright sunny day both ways. So here, if it is a short day plants, many type of plants grow here. The roses are there. The roses grow the best. I talk about the chrysanthemum grow the best. The tulips grow the best. The guava grow the best. The pineapple grow the best. So all these different type of crops and the plants that we understand, short day, meaning they need duration of sunlight lesser than 8 hours. Something roughly around 6 to 7 hours enough. 6 to 8 hours enough. So not more than 8 hours. So a duration of roughly around 5 to 6 hours is enough for their growth. A duration of sunlight 5 to 6 hours is enough for their growth. They don't need more than that. And if it is more than that, then they will not grow properly. So when we say short day plants, what do you understand? These are those type of plants which need a shorter duration of sunlight for germination, fruiting, flowering. So if these are the two categories understood, then what is day neutral plants? Day neutral means they need a more or less roughly equal duration of sunlight and shade. The duration of sunlight and shade is almost equal. In a 24-hour day, if roughly they require 10-11 hours of sunlight, they need another 10-12 hours of shade also, meaning night time. So if this is the same, this is if it is true, when we talk about snapdragons and all, see there's some examples, snapdragons are there. So various types of plants are there, not only the snapdragon to talk about. So these different, it is the same word, it is the same word. Snapdragon is the same word, it's a single word there. So these is what to understand snapdragons and all, so that we are talking about the day neutral plants. Improvement in yield. Now that we talk about the improvement in yield, look into the three areas that we are going to talk about. In this part of the chapter, what are we to talk about? How the improvement can be brought about. Improvement can be brought about, first of all, by improving the variety. The improvement in variety has to be brought about. Improvement can be brought about by the improvement in the variety. Then improvement in production. We have to think about developed methods of production. And next is improvement in the protection method. Improvement in the protection methods. So the moment we are talking about how can we think of improvement, to understand the concept of improvement, we are to understand that improvement has to be brought about in three different areas. Improvement has to be brought about in three different areas. So the first that we are going to talk about would be improvement in the variety. What is the meaning of improvement in variety? Here, to talk about the improvement in variety, we are to study two different methods. What are the methods we are going to talk about? How can improvement in the variety be brought about? Methods which are responsible for bringing out the improvement in variety. Say suppose we look into the methods. The methods would be, the first method that we talk about would be hybridization. What is the first method? We are trying to understand hybridization. Now in hybridization, say suppose I am talking about one particular plant, and this particular plant has the fruits and the flowers and the branches, etc. And this particular plant has gives rise to certain type of mangoes, say suppose. It gives rise to certain type of mangoes. Let us talk about one example. Now in this case, we are trying to come across that the type of the fruit that it gives rise to. Now I'm saying that this is a type of a mango plant. For example, I am talking about a breed of variety. I understand mango variety 1. Now this variety, it has got some good characteristics and some undesirable characters also. Why are we talking about hybridization? What is the meaning of hybridization? Hybrid meaning take two portions or two parts of two different plants, merge them together to make a new plant. That is the concept of hybridization. So what is done here? In this one variety of mango, it is found that this variety is resistant to diseases. It is resistant to disease-causing germs, pests. It is resistant meaning it will not be easily affected. Resistant to pest. At the same time, the size of the fruit size is small, and at the same time, highly nutritive. Yes. So we are talking about three characteristics that we have studied. Out of the three characteristics, we come across that yes, one characteristic is nothing that appreciable because the fruit size is small. And then I talk about another variety, and in this variety it is understood that in this particular variety, if you look into in this particular variety, we get to see that the mangoes which are growing, the fruit size is quite big enough. So here are the features. If I talk about mango variety 2 or B here, what are the properties? The properties are the fruit size big. What about the fruit size? The fruit size is big enough. Okay, it is also comparatively nutritive, and it is also sensitive to pests, but it is very, very sensitive to pests. What is the meaning of sensitive? Easily it gets affected by disease-causing germs or pathogens in the soil, in the water. So now the process of hybridization has to be done. How is the process of hybridization be done? In the process of hybridization, it is possible that cut out a small portion of the stem from here, and merge it here. Cut out a small portion of the stem from here and merge it here. This is one method. Cut out a portion of the stem from here, merge here, or something else that can be done is, in this process of hybridization, we may also come across that the stem of one plant is kept intact and the stem of the other plant is brought and it is put together. So this is variety B, this is variety A, and these are all tied with ropes or tissues here. So what is being done? That the stem of one plant and the stem of the other, they have been put together. So why stem of B is kept in contact with the soil? Because we have some good characteristics like it is nutritive. I'm sorry, I take A here. We have to take A here and then B here. So why do we take A? Because A has more of good characters. It is resistant also and highly nutritive also. So we are taking part of B, merging with the stem of A. And there are names also to this. The stem which remains in contact with the soil, that is known as the stalk. This is known as the stalk and this is known as the shock. And after some few months, we will get to see that now the new branches coming up. Now what will happen? Yes, new branches coming up. They now give rise to small branches. They now give rise to small branches. And then the leaves and the flowers are coming up. And now that the fruit they develop, the fruit that they are developing, the fruit will have, or the plant overall will have which characteristics? Now because the hybridization has already happened, this particular hybrid plant is supposed to have good characteristics. Now, not necessarily every time. If they don't develop the good characteristics, the breeder will not keep growing them. The breeder will keep growing them only when they have good characteristics. So now what is going to happen? Unless and until the breeder gets all these characteristics together, they will keep trying the process of hybridization. So ultimately now, the breeder is successful in getting this characteristic and this characteristic and this characteristic all together in the hybrid plant. So these are the three good characteristics that the breeder wants to bring together. And this is a hybrid. So this plant now gives rise to fruit. The mangoes are appreciably big in size. The plant is nutritive also. The fruit is nutritive also. And the plant is very much resistant to pests also. With various different type of disease causing organism. If this is what is done, this is what is known as hybridization. This is what is known as hybridization. But there's another method that you have to understand. And the second method is known as genetic modification. And the second method is known as genetic modification. Now, if this is what has to be done, this is a more tedious and a more elaborate method. Now, in case of genetic modification, I select a plant which has got some good characteristics. This particular plant has got some good characteristics. Now, I have to select a plant which has got more of good characteristics and less of undesirable characteristics. So now this particular plant has got the flower. The flower will undergo the process of formation of the fruit, the seed. This flower, when it is in the process of formation of a seed, now this particular flower has resulted in the formation of the seed here, the multicellular structure. At this stage, the cells are studied. So at this stage, the cells are studied. The cells of the seeds are studied. And then in these particular seed, what is being done? In these particular individual cells, one particular or a small part of the embryo is studied now. Embryo means a group of cells which can give rise to a new plant. So now, a small portion of the cells of the embryo are studied. And in these cells of the embryo, now what are they going to do? In these cells of the embryo, now they are going to make a whole lot of changes. In these cells of the embryo, they are going to make, now say, they find out the cell of the embryo. So they have selected some cells of the embryo. And in these cells of the embryo, now they look into the chromosome. They look into the chromosomes now. They look into the chromosomes. So they would study the chromosomes this way. They would study the chromosomes this way. Next is what? They will try to find out the DNA of the chromosome. Try to understand the DNA of the chromosome. So this chromosome they will try to study in detail. So what would be the DNA of the chromosome? The DNA of the chromosome would be something like this, they suppose. And this is the DNA of the chromosome. And by the process of genetic modification, they would try to change one undesirable characteristic for something good. So now, this is a plant where the embryo has got the DNA. For example, try understanding now that maybe this is one particular gene. Now, every the DNA would have many genes like this. No, the DNA will have many segments, functional segments, and every functional segment is known as a gene. Every functional segment is responsible for one or the other character. So there will be a gene for this character, there will be a gene for this character, there will be a gene for this character. So now, if it is a concept of genetic modification, then now what? In this DNA, this particular gene has to be removed out. This particular gene has to be removed out. So if this gene is removed out, now next what? The DNA will actually have a structure something like this, where the gene is now removed out. So there is a vacant space here because we have already removed out the genes. So where is the gene now? The gene is now replaced. The gene is now replaced. So we are saying this gene which is responsible for the formation of a faulty character, we don't want it anymore. But something has to be fitting. So in this particular region, another gene from another particular parent, another particular plant has to be fitted. And this is always done with the help of some molecular enzymes. This is done with the help of some molecular enzymes. So what is this? Gene from another cell, gene from another plant. So now this faulty gene is removed and a new gene is been inserted. Is this possible at the level of a cell and the chromosome? Yes, very much. So this is a process known as the DNA technology. Tell me.
But how can we remove a particular gene?
So much it is done. This method of study whether respective single genes are removed out by different type of enzymes, the entire gene, the entire DNA which is so long, every single gene can be changed. But this is allowed only for the plants, not for the animals at all. This is a big field of science when we talk about biotechnology. This is what is also known as the molecular biology. So now in the concept of molecular biology, what can be done? All these things are possible where the process of study. Now this will take a couple of years to be done. It is not just one day work. The process of hybridization can be done just in 1 or 2 weeks. But this is a tedious process. First of all, locating the genes and studying the DNA of certain cells, that itself takes months and months. You can understand when we were trying to recover from the COVID period, understanding the gene sequence of the viruses and the proteins and etc. It took almost a year. And then came the concept of vaccine. So same here, that whenever the concept of DNA study and gene comes, it is always a lengthy process, but it is very much possible. Isolate cells from the embryo, it has to be, not from a mature part of a plant, from the embryo, because these cells will constantly keep growing. So do all these modifications one after the other, change the gene, and the terms are also same like that, deletion and addition. The terms are also same like the computer terms that we talk about, the delete and the add. So these terms are also the same, deletion of a gene, addition of a gene, and this can be done. So after that, this new DNA that we got, where in that embryo, the change has been done in that embryo. Now this DNA is already done away with this gene. So this DNA, which is present in this embryo, and the embryo is already modified now. Genetic modification is already done in that embryo. So after some time, when the genetic modification is already done, and now we have got the embryo, and this embryo is a multicellular structure, and after some time we come across that this embryo or the seed will give rise to a new plant, and it gives rise to a new plant, and the new plant that grows, whether we talk about a mango, we talk about a bean or a pulse or etc., it will always have the modified characteristics because enough of changes in the gene has been done. This concept of modification of the gene Again, I repeat, it is not applicable for any animals. In the concept of animal kingdom, it is not allowed. In the animal kingdom, it is not allowed. But yes, for the plants. Today, whatever different type of pulses, grains that we eat, the rice that we eat today are all modified genetically. The pulses that we eat today, the moong and the masoor and etc., that we eat are all genetically modified. Variety of crops, the brinjal that we eat today are genetically modified. The cauliflower that we eat today genetically modified. The tomatoes that we eat today are genetically modified. And since these are genetically modified, the crops are also known as such. These are known as GMOs. What is the meaning of GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms. What is the meaning of GMOs? GMO stands for genetically modified organisms. So now, when we are talking about a basic concept of genetic modification and hybridization, which is an easier method, hybridization obviously is an easier method. And when we are talking about what is hybridization all about, it is only about merging the plant parts of two different plants and trying to bring the good characteristics in one single plant. And what is genetic modification about? Genetic modification is all about the concept of changing the DNA, changing the genes, and then getting a better variety of a plant. Now, next is, look at the next part, that factors for which variety. Now, why should the variety be improved? Why should breeders, scientists, and breeders all over the world, why they are trying to improve the variety? Say suppose today, if you ask your parents also, roughly they also may be able to tell you that the type of the tomatoes and the cabbage and the brinjal that we got maybe when we were small children are not the same that we get to see today. Roughly, I remember the type of tomatoes that used to come to our house. I still remember they never stayed so long. Today, the tomatoes that I buy, since I have to run my family, I buy vegetables on my own, and the tomatoes I get to see, they can be stored almost for 15 days. But I roughly remember the tomatoes that used to come to our house when I was a small child. They used to get rotten very soon. They were so soft, and that is what we always talk about. The brinjal that we get to see today, so big. I don't remember that this was the size of a brinjal when I was a small girl. The size of the brinjal, how come it is so big now? By the process of genetic modification.
Why? So when we like modify genetically, so is it harmful for us? Like we are adding something.
It is not harmful. When we are talking about genetic modification, is not harmful. That's a myth that genetic modification is harmful. Unless and until we talk about using hormones to develop a plant, that is a different concept again. Using different type of chemical components or hormones only to make the crop bigger, look bigger, that is different. But the genetically modified crops, as I just now told you, that half of the crops and the vegetables and the fruits and the grains that we are consuming today, we are not aware. But actually, if you go through and read properly, you will see most of them are genetically modified today. Talk about the flowers which we use nowadays. Most of them are genetically modified. Why? Why that modification majorly is done? So that they become resistant to the environmental change. So many crops which are grown in our country, so many flowers which are grown in our country go abroad. I hope you are quite a number of you are aware also. So now these crops and flowers which grow in our country, but they go abroad, far off countries, and they are being sold there. So think of certain type of fruits. Now I give you a very, very true example. So suppose in India we have got certain type of mangoes. Put up this stand. We have got certain type of mangoes. All of you must be aware about types of mangoes like the Alfonso. No? Alfonso mangoes. Now I give you this example. I'm sure you must be aware about these names. Now these Alfonso mangoes, you must be aware that it is exported to a great extent. These Alfonso mangoes, you go to other countries in the US also, you'll go and find them. These are there. But is that the best variety of mango in our country? Not exactly. Not exactly. But why are these mangoes exported there? Believing that this is the best variety, and people abroad, they know also it is the best variety in India. But actually it is not the very best variety. There are many other varieties more nutritive and more juicier and more tasty also. I talk about some varieties like the langra. The langra is a very good variety. Are you aware? Now these variety of mangoes, so nutritive and so juicy. But then why they are not exported? Langra is not exported much in the outer countries. Why? Because the skin perishes away much faster and the shelf life, it is called shelf life, is lesser. So if langra has to be exported, half of it will be rotten by the time it goes to the market of Canada and markets of USA, etc. So, but if, what about the Alfonso? It stays for a long time. The tomatoes that we talk about, the apples that we get in our markets are all from other countries. So these apples which have been grown in those countries maybe a one or harvested 1 month before, then exported. After that also when we buy, we can keep those apples in our own homes even without the refrigerator also for another 15 days as it is. So, but then all apples are not like that. You will come across in our country also there are certain breeds of apples which you buy and within 7 days they start getting rotten. So are these good enough for export? No, these are not good enough for export. So every particular type of crop, grain, flowers, fruits, vegetables, all are, some are having some good characteristics, and those which have got good characteristics are made even better by the way of genetic modification. So that, and these are the most commercially in demand crops. No? So this concept of genetic modification, you have to remember. Now the question is that why these type of variety improvement is needed? Variety improvement has to be done so that the production is more. I talk about a genetically modified crop. I got a type of a tomato now genetically modified and I'm growing them. In a short period of time I get enough yield. Yield means production. In a short period of time I get enough yield. I can market them. I don't have to worry much about the rotting part and the perishing away part because I can keep them as it is. The skin is now harder. The skin is now the tomatoes nowadays. If that comes to our house, you can check. The outer cover is quite hard. The traditional, conventional tomatoes of our country, they are not like this. They are very soft, which you cannot store for more than 3 to 5 days. They will start getting rotten. They will start getting rotten very, very fast. Okay, so this is high yield. What about improved quality? Why all these methods have to be done? Hybridization or genetic modification, why to be done? So that the quality becomes better. What does take this point? Biotic and abiotic resistance. What is the meaning of biotic resistance? We want our crops that we are growing as a farmer.
Resistance from living things.
Biotic and abiotic. So a farmer, a breeder would always want his plants to be resistant from sun, temperature, humidity. Say suppose now that there is continuous rains and yet rains to happen, no? Now there may be certain type of crops which will get perished away. The roots start getting decomposed if the rains are too much and the soil is having too much water. But there may be certain type of crops which are still alive and functional and flourishing. So that is a good variety of a crop. That's a good variety of a plant. What is the meaning of biotic resistance? In the soil there are hundreds of different type of bacteria, pathogens, nematodes, worms. So most of the plants, they become very, very easily affected by these. The nematodes start entering into the roots and harm the stem and etc. etc. So now when I talk about that, if the plant is resistant meaning not easily affected, sensitive meaning easily affected. So if a plant is having biotic resistance, biotic meaning living organisms, plant, pathogens, germs, etc. Abiotic meaning sunlight, water, temperature, like that. If the plant is having biotic and abiotic resistance, that is a good plant or a bad plant? A good variety. That's a good variety of a plant. So the farmers would always look for such type of a plant. Change in the maturity duration. Change in maturity duration. You understand what is the meaning of maturity? What do you understand? For us, when we talk about maturity, say suppose we talk about a child. No, we often talk about this. A child, the maturity. What do you understand by that?
Until he understands the word and
Much
better.
Able to correlate with the external environment independently. So now that we talk about, yes, for the plant also that is important. For the plant also that is important. Is the plant able to mature? Is the plant able to undergo the process of growth? In case of a plant, maturity here majorly talks about, is the plant able to undergo the process of growth of the leaves and the flowers and the fruits independently? So if I now talk about that maturity period, say suppose I talk about a farmer, he has got a farmland, and in a farmland he has got one breed of coconut which takes almost about 2 years. Coconuts are generally lengthy duration plants. There is one breed of coconut which takes almost about 2 years to give rise to the first fruit. Another breed of coconut which takes almost about 2.5 years to give rise to the first fruit. So obviously the breeder would go for the first type, at least 6 months lesser. Again, one breed of rose takes.
This can affect the quality.
Not necessary. Not necessary. Unless and until you are growing them, if it is modified this way, then no. But if you are talking about maturity and growth only by the fertilizer, then yes. Then yes. So right now we are not talking about production methods. We are only talking about the variety methods. Now, I'm seeing again, a breeder has 2 varieties of banana growing in his farm. One breed of banana, I'm talking about variety, remember, and duration. I'm talking about duration, maturity duration. One particular type of banana in our country comes in almost about 20 to 30 different varieties. So now that we talk about the bananas, one variety of banana, nutritive, but takes almost about 10 months to give rise to the flower. Almost 10 months to give rise to the flower. But another breed of banana, in 6 months only it gives rise to the flower. So which is better? The 6 months, provided there is no compromise in the quality. Then the 6 months, the breeder would always go for the 6 months. So maturity in the duration. So all, just like human also, no, you come across some children, they become very fast, they become mature, and some children they take a little bit longer. Same like that, plants also. Wider adaptability. Adaptability meaning? Adaptation. What is the meaning of adaptation?
Getting, like, learning something fast, like.
And getting accustomed. You came here, how many months you have been coming to UT?
Change or something.
How many months you have been coming to UT?
5 to 6 months.
5 to 6 months. 3 months for you. So did you get adapted? Did you get adapted to this environment? Yes. 4 months. We'll talk about the correct date tomorrow. So now that we are talking about, in this 4 months, 5 months, you got adapted. Adapted to what? The system and the people and the teachers and the testing method, etc., etc. Same like the plant. The plant should get adapted to that environmental condition, and it will get adapted to the environmental condition provided it has got the correct method of rooting, correct method of flowering.
And the plant will not adapt to the conditions, right? The conditions.
The plant has to get adapted.
No, plants are based on the conditions, right?
No, the plant has to get adapted. I talk about 2 varieties of plant. These plants, now say suppose I talk about 2 varieties of rice. The same plot of land, one variety this side, another variety this side. And now that there is rains happening, and now maybe now in the next 1 week time it may come across also 15 days continuous rainfall. Some breed of rice and paddy, though they require water logging, if the water becomes little bit more, they start getting died out. But the other variety, never mind. If the water is this much also, which is an optimum, they are growing the best. If the water is this much also, not a problem. They are still growing. So this is better adapted to water. So the second variety is better adapted to water. So exactly same like that. The plants, now that you will see again in the month of December, I think every time we are nowadays observing this. December, January, which is not supposed to rain, but we get to see, in the month of this year also we had in the month of January, 2-3 days heavy rainfall. Most of the crops, the dry season crops, most of the crops die away. But there will be some breeds of the crops which will not die away, they will still remain alive and functional, and fruiting flowering still happen. So these are the good varieties. Good varieties. So they are able to adapt. They may have special features in their leaves, flowers, roots, etc. And they are able to adapt better. Adaptability. So what do you understand by wider adaptability? See here it's written also, help in stabilizing the crop production under environmental conditions. Under different climatic conditions in different areas. So when we are talking about is the plant able to adapt even if there is environmental change, because environmental conditions are constantly changing. The farmer cannot predict every time. The breeder cannot predict every time. So if the breeder is not at a loss much by growing a particular plant which may have come through unseasonal rains, which may have come through very high temperature, and still the productivity good. That's a good variety because it could adapt to the environmental conditions much better. For example, human also we say, a person who is able to adapt in all different type of environmental conditions is always a versatile person. But yes, some of us we may not be able to adapt every time in new group of people, new environmental conditions. Agronomic character, that's very important for you. Agronomic character, underline there. Agronomic from the word agriculture. Agronomic means every particular plant has got special feature to adapt and to take nutrients from that environment and utilize its nutrients better. For example, if I talk about, did we ever see a mango tree short? Did we ever see a banana plant? A banana plant having thick stem? No. So that's the same thing. Did we ever see a lemon plant, a big tall tree? Not at all. And the pea plants, did we ever see having thick stem? No, it is always a tendriller plant. So every particular plant, if you see, why do they have such differences? I talk about the pea tendrils. Tendrils. No, I talk about the grape, again tendrils, climbers. I talk about the pumpkin, climbers, creepers again. But I talk about the mango stips and bark. Why like that? Based on what type of plant, what type of fruit is it going to give rise to, which season it is going to grow the best, the condition of the plant will be something like that. That is what is called agronomic qualities. For example, I may talk about the pea. Why the pea need to be in the form of a tendril? Why not in the form of a big tree? Because the branching pattern and the short dwarf nature of the pea plant is best suitable. So that since it is a new small plant, if it utilizes all its nutrients in the process of formation of the bark, and
will not be enough.
The number of seeds will be very less. So see, in this small sized pea plant, we get hundreds of those small pea pods, and each pod having another 7 to 8 seeds inside. So that small plant is giving rise to hundreds and hundreds of seeds, every seed with source of protein. But if that much of nutrient is utilized in the formation of the bark and the stem and the branches, it's just a waste. The bark and the branch of the etc. is not going to be edible. But if I talk about the cinnamon, the condition is different again. If I talk about cinnamon, the condition is different again. If I talk about apples and guava, the condition is different again. If I talk about the grasses, the condition is different again. So these are all called agronomic characteristics. Agronomic characteristics. Talk about the pumpkin. Pumpkin is a climber, creeper. Creeper. So now when I talk about the pumpkins and the gourd, these different type of plants, just imagine if this plant would have utilized all, because they have got the root system that they have is not spread out, a short spreading out. Now they are absorbing little bit nutrients only. They can absorb little nutrient only because of their root structure. They don't have the mango and the banyan sort of a root, elaborate root. No, they don't have that. So the root system is very, very less expanded. So they can absorb nutrients also much less. But the fruit that they give rise to, the pumpkin can be so big, the pumpkin is so big, the gourd is so long. So when we are talking the pumpkin and the gourd and the melons, they are so big. But look into the plant is so small. So the adaptation is as such that the plant gives away all the nutrients that it absorbs from for the making up of the crop. Does not waste anything in the formation of the stem and the branches, etc. This is what we talk about as agronomic, special agronomic characteristics. Next is we'll have to look into the production management. Production, I'm not starting today because we'll not finish up anything. It's almost done. Anything that you want to ask from here? Today we studied majorly about the concepts of hybridization, genetic modification. You are asked about examples, you are asked about differences. What are some differences between genetic modification and hybridization. Okay, read this part of the chapter and the textbook also. Read the textbook also, all of it.
किधर मैं CBSE को सर है क्या